right. Welcome to another episode of Buzz Beat. Thank you to everyone joining us live on the Substack app or on YouTube. This is Brian Geisinger. Today, I'll be joined by Darian. Richie is producing. And today, we're going to be discussing draft prospects and just sort of some of the other best college players still remaining in the Sweet 16. The Hornets, just on that page, have lost two straight, falling to Oklahoma City by a large number last Friday, and then losing to the Heat on Sunday. They're in action. We're recording this Tuesday, March 25th. They're back home tonight against the Orlando Magic. Basically just like 10 or so games left in the season. So we've got a lot of year-end wrap-up stuff with the Hornets coming up in the next few weeks, and certainly plenty of draft and team building stuff down the pipeline as well. Last week, we did our sort of 12 players to watch in the 2025 NCAA tournament. We did basically 3 from East Region, but now we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do our own draft and so here are the parameters and sort of like the rules for the draft. Darian and I are going to pick teams. These are going to be just 5 players each per team, so just 10 total players to be eligible to be drafted in this. In this little game we're playing here, the players team must still be alive in the Sweet 16. So that does narrow the field pretty considerably. I mean, at this point, we've lost some of the top draft prospects. Baylor and VJ Edgecombe are gone. Harper, Bailey, Rutgers never even made the tournament. Trey Johnson in Texas are gone. So, we're going to have to, I would say, putting this together, like the rosters are going to be, in my mind, sort of like a blend of, probably all like pro level type talent, some of which is, lottery picked, potential, but also blended sort of with the knowledge of, if you're trying to win a college basketball game tonight, who would you want on the floor for that? So to also put this together, we must draft a combination of both backcourt and frontcourt players. I don't know. I guess, Darian, if you wanted to draft 5 different 6'8" guys and just switch everything, I guess that would be. I guess I should say. I guess that isn't allowed, but would be fun to see nonetheless. And then at the end of that, once we pick our 5-man rosters, we will each draft a coach. And of course, to be eligible, the coaches would have to be still alive in Sweet 16 play. This will be judged based off of the fit and talent of the team more so than just like the individual. So I don't know exactly about how, Darian, the way you were thinking about this, but in my head, I was trying to like put together like an actual cohesive team. You know what I mean? And so it's not just drafting the best 5 players in terms of, personal evaluation, but also thinking how those guys would fit and you would, play them together, and how, the coach that you're drafting would maybe even go about using them as well. So there is some sort of there's some scheme involved in this, and there's some fit and roster construction things to take into account as well. And then they're just, again, they're, like, to sort of repeat this, there is, I don't know, like there's an interesting player type to go for in these types of things, because it's not directly transferable from, college production, obviously, to the NBA. So I'm kind of curious to see if one of us goes in the direction of going for more of like a, college style player, someone that has, limited, NBA potential or something like that. But before we get into any of that and start drafting, Darian, how are you doing, man? And did you enjoy the opening weekend of the 2025 tournament?
I definitely enjoyed it. I'm doing well. This is one of my favorite times of the year. Always love college basketball. Some interesting games. I know a lot of people were upset that we weren't getting the upsets that we've had in the last couple of years. But I mean, up until the last couple of years, we weren't. It was kind of like this. Most of the time, it was pretty standard that a top team at some point was making it to the Sweet 16, Elite Eight, so on and so forth. So I think we're getting exactly how it usually is. But what I do like is that we're at those who watch college basketball, you've always wondered if they haven't played already, you're like, what would these teams look like matching up? And now we're probably getting a lot of those mix and matches. So that's going to be really, cool to watch going forward. As we're going to find out here, there's still a lot of guys who may not be NBA prospects, but they're definitely very fun to watch playing basketball. So, and unfortunately for a lot of these guys, we won't see them again at in the college ranks. So that part is like always the bummer when you realize this is the guys last year, especially with that COVID year, adding that extra time. So you spent even more time with these guys. But either way, I think this is at first I was like, oh no, I know who my little 10 are, but then I started going through the teams and I'm like, oh man, this is a lot harder than expected because they mentioned you're also looking at just good college players. I'm not worried about some of the players. You're not worried about what they project going forward. So it just definitely opened up the pool, and I'm excited to see how this goes.
Yeah, should be interesting. I really enjoyed the first weekend of the tournament. Wasn't like I don't think it was like a historically memorable one.
Yeah.
There were some decent games, but for the most part, I thought it was it wasn't like there weren't any sort of like standout highlights, but all of it is. I mean, it's always fun to watch and certainly see some of the tournament, like the production from CBS and the venues and the the B-roll bringing in the games in and out, and then just I thought some of the play was still pretty high level, and it's set up for some pretty fun Sweet 16 matchups. So we might be able to talk about a little bit more about that at the end of the pod, but we're gonna go ahead and get into the draft. And Richie Randall, our producer, he is the David Stern style commissioner of this fake mock draft league. Look, I don't even think there was I don't think there was a lottery drawing or anything like that. We just got on the call and he just said Darian's going to get the number 1 pick. So I've got some questions and I've got some gripes and some complaints with with our dictator here who's ruling over us. I'm not loving that, but Darian will get the number 1 pick, and then we're going to go, as you probably would expect, snake style throughout the rest as we finish picks 1 through 10. So Darian will pick 1, I'll take picks 2 and 3. And I think, once we get to each player, we'll maybe talk about them a little bit here and there. And then maybe at the end, sort of just like talk about fit philosophy a little bit when we also get into the coach that we have selected. So I would just say drum roll, please. Darian, you're not on the clock because I don't see a countdown anywhere on the screen here, but my guess is you don't need too long to think about this one, but we're gonna go ahead and give you the number 1 pick here. Darian, who do you take and why?
All right, so with the number 1 pick, as you mentioned, there really wasn't much thought into it. Once I found out I had the number 1 pick, same as you, I did prepare to not have the number 1 pick. So honestly, it kind of throws everything off just a little bit because now you get 2 picks before my next pick. So that's the only thing that throws me off.
Sure.
But with the first pick, I'm going Cooper Flagg. He makes building the rest of the roster a lot easier. Makes the coaching fit a lot easier. I mean, there's definitely a lot of great coaches, a lot of great players, but just in case I don't get everybody I want, having Cooper Flagg just makes that a lot easier. We mentioned on the last podcast how he is the Swiss Army knife. He does a little bit of everything, help defense. You can maybe run him as small ball 5 just a little bit, especially in the college.
Duke has done it. Duke has done it.
Yeah.
It's been like a real, like they used it probably for less than 100 minutes this season, but they've done it every now and then, sort of like during the middle of conference play. But it is tough for them to justify because their centers are so good. I mean, they have
exactly.
They have 3 awesome centers. And John Shire generally wants one of them on the floor 90 whatever percent of the time. But
it makes sense.
Coop can definitely play small ball 5, right. And Duke has some cool stuff that they'll do with him offensively when they get to those lineups.
So yeah, that's just the hope, allowing him to really, as Duke does, allow him to just really have the offense pivot off him, no matter if he's a small ball 5, whether he's at the 4. It does create a lot of interesting, like what I'm going to do with 5, like my center. It calls for a lot of interesting pairings. So I don't know if I want to get technical or get fun with it, but definitely he opens that up a lot, and that's always good to have. Because I'm someone that I would say like my centers to protect the basket. But
I would say there's a good chance it's either his college teammate or his high school teammate. I would say one of those two guys would maybe have a good case. And
Right.
then those are two names we may hear during. Now, just to say this too, like I know going through this exercise, like we're gonna end up leaving off some really good players.
So many good players.
It's just like again, it's a finite number.
Mm.
I even thought about trying to argue with Richie to see if we could get in, pick 6 and pick 7 per team. But look, the commissioner, again, he's ruling with an iron fist. So I'm just, I didn't even want to broach the subject, but I was tempted. Yeah, look, Cooper he's also just so easy to build a roster around in my mind because he's so malleable. The handle's getting better. He can self-create, but he can play on and off the ball. He can shoot off screens. He can post up. He's a weapon going against, mismatches against the switch. Duke has, big chunks of its playbook that are designed to get Cooper, switched on to smaller players. Then it's been fun to see how ACC teams throughout the year have tried to sort of like, alter their own coverage patterns to kind of keep some of those guys out of those matchups. The team defense and weak side rim protection with Cooper is really good. I tend to think he's, like I said, I think I said this last week. I don't think he's as sticky, sort of like one-on-one defensively as you might think, but he is, he's quite good at that too. And I do think he'll get better with that as he ages. He certainly has like the frame for it, and his competitiveness is just, is off the charts. Like he's a home run in terms of all the intangibles and being about the right stuff too. So great pick. And there's a pretty sizable gap, I would say, between, there's gonna be a big gap in my mind between Cooper and whomever goes number 2 in the draft night. Right. And a lot of those guys I would look to next aren't available right now either. So the one other thing I wanted to say about Cooper too, like in preparation for this, one of the things I did was I sort of like took the player pool of guys who are remaining in the Sweet 16, and then I sort of broke it down in like a chart by like player types. And there, there's some overlap, but I sort of had like primary initiators for NBA prospect, primary initiators for college, scoring combo guards, connective guards, movement shooter, big wing initiator, 3 and D wing, front court athletes, stretch 5, defensive 5, front court playmaker, in college 5, sort of like the more like back to the basket types. But like it was just one of those reminders, and we think about this stuff all the time. I think when we're talking about team development, roster construction with the NBA specific to the Hornets on this pod, but just one of those reminders of like, even when you're just chopping it up into this one sort of like random pool of players, just the guys who are remaining in college basketball in the Sweet 16 this year, just how few guys there are like Cooper, like the tall big wing initiator. They're just like, I really think in that category of player, I think there's really just like 2 guys that sort of like fit that archetype. Cooper is absolutely the best one. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 more guys. And I'm going to try to maybe see if I can snake one of those guys later. But with that said, I'm not going to go there quite yet. I'm going to go ahead and try to build from the wing here. So I'm going to go with my number 1 pick. I'm going to go with Cooper Flagg's teammate at Duke. I'm going to go Con Knipple. He's been awesome this season. 39% on threes, 11 3-point attempts per 100 possessions, 58% on twos, shooting 67% at the rim, 91% from the line, 16% assist rate, positive assist to turnover ratio. He's so he's really malleable offensively. Like when Cooper was down at the ACC tournament, well, Duke just starts running a lot of the Cooper sets with Con. I mean, he was playing point forward for them. He's excellent coming off screens, like big time movement shooter, but they run a lot of pick and roll with him too. He's a great distributor in the pick and roll, very good at throwing those lob passes over the top to Kaman Malawach. Like there is a spectrum of like players, sort of like comps and archetypes I see him fitting into in the NBA. Like I labeled him as like a movement shooter for this exercise. But like you absolutely could put him in the big wing initiator role too.
For sure.
He's 6'7", 215, I believe is what 217, I think is what Duke lists him as. And so there's some Gordon Hayward potential for him too. You know what I mean? Like that he kind of has that, like they throw it to him. He can post up against smaller players. He's good in the mid-range. That said, the vast majority of his shots, like he is a dunks and threes guy, like not a dunks and threes. He's like a rim and threes guy. 84% of his shots this season have either been at the rim or they've been threes. He's good in the mid-range too, but just like he can self-create enough. He's strong. Defensively, like he's not amazing, and I think that's something he'll struggle with a little bit more on the next level. But for the college game, he's actually he's a pretty good defender for what Duke's trying to do. So I'll go Con Knipple with my number one pick, the number 2 overall pick. For the number 3 overall pick, and for my second pick, I'm gonna keep building out on the wing here. I'm going to go a player we talked about last week. I'm going to go Jace Richardson from Michigan State. I want another 3-point shooter. So I got another 40% 3-point shooter. Richardson, just under 41% this season from deep, 55% on twos, 84% from the line, 63% true shooting, low turnover player, has some shot creation abilities that's coming online more and more. Very, very good in the mid-range, great touch in the mid-range, great at using screens. There's all kinds of stuff that I could do with Richardson and Con Knipple in the half court, running those guys off actions together. And then defensively, he gives me a stopper at the guard spot too. Right. A great athlete, super competitive, has some rim protection, can create a little bit of havoc there too. And again, super, super competitive player. I'm willing to bet that's going to be a theme with the guys that we're picking in this. Like you've got a lot of real gamers. And so I'm going Richardson with my number 2 pick and putting him next to Con. I know we talked about Jace last week, but any other thoughts on him? He didn't have an amazing, the game against New Mexico. He was not great, although he made some plays for them down the stretch. Just any other leftover thoughts on Richardson, or if not, you can go ahead and get to your picks 2 and 3 here.
I don't have any leftover thoughts on Jace Richardson, except for the fact that I do believe that I'm very interested to see where he goes. I know we're far, far away from that, but I think that he just has a skill set that really I think a lot of teams are going to love. And as you mentioned, he's a guy that you can obviously tell he loves playing the game. I also enjoy the pace he plays at. I'm really excited to see him in the open floor with the NBA as opposed to how it is in college where everybody just gathers around the ball for some reason instead of spreading out. So I just want to see kind of what that's like. But yeah, also I'd really like to pick up Knipple just because of the fact he was someone that I thought about as well. I mean, as a Carolina fan, he killed us every time. But I like how crafty he is. He almost, it's specifically, referring to diss track class, he almost is to me, what people want from, I always mispronounce his name, but the guard from Illinois that we talked about, he just reminds me of that. I would rather have Knipple if I had to choose. I would rather have Knipple than him, even though I think their play styles obviously are slight different. But I think the way certain roles you will use Knipple in, you could use him in as well. But I much rather use Knipple. He just seems more polished.
Yeah,
he definitely his decision making in general, not just with the ball, but just he knows where to be on the floor. He knows how to play off his teammates. He's always looking ahead off rebounds or turnovers. I just really like his game. And I mean, it started early. You thought he was pretty good, and he jumped up a lot of boards, and now he's just even better. And you would think that at some point, playing next to Malawach and Cooper, that he would get forgotten about. And that's something we just typically see in college. That third guy always kind of just never really gets the shine. But no, he stood out. Part of it, of course, maybe because Cooper got hurt. But no, I think even before then, he was here to stay.
Some of it, too, is Malawach. He's the number 2 prospect on this team, and he's probably a top, 5 pick, top 6 pick, somewhere in that range. But he's so, defense oriented. And I mean, and I talked about this last week. Malawach is not – I sort of push back on some of, the limited – offensive profile narrative with him because they do ask him to do a fair amount of stuff, in the high post as he's not, I wouldn't say he's a hub, but he definitely does, sort of help them get into some of their second side actions and their second and third progressions. They're usually flowing it through him at the elbow or Brown or Gongba if those guys are in it at the backup 5. And just his rim, he works really well in the pick and roll with both Cooper and Con, but his rim pressure just opens so much stuff for them. And I think one of the things that's also really helped like this team gel and flow is that like, so Knipple is like maybe the number 3 prospect on the team, but he's number 2 in terms of usage, you know?
Agreed.
And so many people on this team, including Cooper, and obviously Cooper's got a crazy usage rate. He touches the ball a ton, but like all of these guys are pretty much pass first dudes. And so everyone's very happy to sort of like, you know, not just turn down a good shot into a great shot, which they do that a lot as well. But if there's a certain night where Tyrese Proctor has it rolling or Isaiah Evans has it rolling, then even a guy like Cooper is happy to like to defer. Do you know what I mean? And just like
for sure.
start trying to feed him and set him up. And Khan's the same way, sort of on both ends of that. So, all right. What are your next 2 picks here? Starting with the 4th overall selection.
So my 4th overall pick, I'm glad you said that Cooper does like to defer because he's going to have to defer if he's with this guy sometimes, but they can play well off each other. And I talked about him last podcast, but that's Walter Clayton Jr. Yeah. I really, really like this guy, man. Like I like how he can have the ball. He doesn't have to have the ball. I think he's at his best when he's kind of just creating for himself and not trying to play make, but he's willing to find an open guy himself. I think that, you know, just maybe forecasting into the rest of my picks, I think that I definitely would have to look into defense because like we've mentioned, Cooper's not a physical on ball stopper per se, and Walter Clayton is definitely not playing any defense unless it's like the last minute of the game, and then that's where I think the competitor in him comes out, and that's something we've seen before, but I'm just not using him as a tool to necessarily handle that. But I think Cooper's going to help, you know, with that a lot. But really, I'm more so offensively talking, just how they could play off each other, the shooting, the scoring. I think that he needs to be able to get to the rim a little better and just finish through contact. That's kind of like a gripe I have of his game. But other than that, I mean, we saw against UConn, he's willing to take the big shot. You know, whether he's getting closed out or wide open, it doesn't matter. He's ready. So that's huge. And I definitely think we're going to need that. He is a little small. I think that, you know, kind of being like 6'2", his play, if you're thinking about how it will look in the NBA, you might want him to be a little taller, which that's not something you could fix. But in terms of just how you would rank him, I think that you would be more willing to take him. He was just a little bit bigger. But overall, though, I think that the talent is scoring. That's what you're drafting him for. And then he's just a gamer. Like he shows up to hoop night in, night out.
Yeah, love the Clayton pick. He was, and I'll get into this a little bit more when it swings back to me. He was in this tier. It was basically between he and Jace. But I wanted to load up on like guards and wings to start and get a defender. And then there were like 3 primary initiators that I wanted to walk away with at least one of them. And in Clayton, he was tops among the group for this exercise, not like draft prospect, though he obviously is a prospect.
Right.
But that's why I was willing to wait on Clayton. But I love the pick. And again, this guy's pull-up 3-point shooting is really, really special. Like it is, and I think it's pretty rare for a college player to sort of like have this much of like this much stability in terms of like range, accuracy, efficiency, volume, and just making a ton of crazy shots this season with his deep shooting range. So Clayton is he's really, really, really special player. I've liked him a lot for 2 seasons at Florida. And I talked about this last week, I think too, but yeah, you've got, he's only 57% of his threes this season have been assisted. So 43% unassisted. He's made 108 threes. So that's a lot of unassisted threes. And then just a little bit more context for sort of some of the shot profile that this guy brings with him to the floor.
Yeah, and I like that you brought up volume because he attempted like 8 threes a game, but he's shooting 39% from 3. And when you think about the level of difficulty some of his threes are, that's just a high clip. So it's completely effortless. And I think you always need a player like that. And that's kind of where I would say that pick was more what has he done in college and not really thinking more so about the future. That having that ability in college, I think is big. So
last thing on Clayton too, I just pulled this up from CBB Analytics. Clayton, 26% of his field goals this season have been 3-point attempts of 25 plus feet. That's 3.6 attempts per game from 25 plus feet. So that's in the 99th percentile nationally, and he's shooting 39% on those looks too. So big time volume, big time efficiency from a serious range, and obviously a lot of those are coming off pick and roll and isolation, so they're unassisted.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, he's just I don't know. I just really like this guy. I'm looking
Mhm.
forward to see what they do in the Sweet 16 because I had that UConn game to just talk about that for a second. It was scary like for them because Florida just seemed like a team that I didn't know who was going to hold a candle to a fire to their candle, but outside of course like the top teams, but
Mhm.
at the end of the day, I think we learned this in any sport, any tournament. It doesn't matter if a team has won back-to-back championships or has championship pedigree. They're not going to, they could be 16 seed. It's not just going to be easy.
Mhm.
So yeah, UConn definitely showed that. But once again, Florida showed why they're a one seed, the way they were able to pull that out. Even though at the end it got a little shaky and they
Yeah.
almost, gave it away with a little if they had a little more
Yep.
time. But for my next pick, I am going with Cooper's teammate, and that's Malawatch,
Mhm.
simply just because of the familiarity between the two. It's almost like an unfair when we talking about putting a team together, just because I have been able to see what their reps look like together, and by far, as we've mentioned in the last podcast, and I'm pretty sure we'll just keep talking about it all throughout the summer. For the way that team is ran and the way they run their offense, it just fits perfectly. Malawatch, as much as he's not the rebounder I want him to be, Cooper makes up for that. Walter Clayton makes up for that a little bit. I'm hoping to get some more players that can make up for it. But overall, what I like about Malawatch is I see every shot contested. He had a good block in the Baylor game. I don't remember when it was, but it was like really early in the game. He had a good block, and he went up there. He went up there to
It was
get
a
it, I believe.
two-handed. It was a two-handed contest where like
Yeah.
he started the possession in drop coverage. It moved back. He is Norchad Omir moved down to the block. The Baylor guard, it was either Rob Wright probably or VJ Edgecombe drove,
Mhm.
and Malawatch covered a decent amount of ground and got over and block pinned it with two hands on. He
Yeah.
was excellent defensively in the Baylor game. He was
And
phenomenal.
that was like honestly
Some
that came to
struggles
my
on the glass.
mind.
Some struggles on the glass.
Mhm.
Like Norchad Omir had 6 offensive rebounds.
Yeah,
Baylor
yeah.
generally rebounded it pretty well in that game on the offensive glass. That is an issue with Malawatch, but man, he's defensively as like a deterrent at the rim, and then with his scheme versatility because he can guard pick and roll
Mhm.
basically any way you want him to. I like him most in the drop, but he can switch, he can hedge, he can be up at the level, and he can do different stuff within each of those sort of like larger scheme concepts. He nails a bunch of stuff. And I talked about this last week too. His ability to talk, um,
Mhm.
I think is really good for a young freshman who he's been in Durham for 6 months,
Right.
so I do think this is also where him getting to be around pros, the last few seasons with the last few years with the South Sudan national team. He's good, close with Luau Deng as
Mhm.
well, who's been at a few Duke games this season. So maybe some of that stuff has sort of like spurred him on, but like his personality as like a team first guy who likes to talk and is getting like tougher by the day and is
Mhm.
super competitive. It's noticeable. I really like Malawatch a lot as a prospect. I do wish he blocked more shots, but
Mhm.
he does alter a lot of shots with his presence and his verticality at the hoop too.
Yeah, and that's definitely something like I value because we see more and more that, especially at the NBA level, everybody can rebound or at least
Mhm.
are coached to do so. So I'm not if we can if he can alter the shot, but we have 3 to 4 guys ready to get the board, then I think that I'll be willing to live with that. Like I mentioned, Walter Clayton can rebound a little bit, especially as a guard, and then of course we know Cooper can. So just having him to be able to defend those shots. Especially if he's probably going to be in pick and roll with, as of now, Walter Clayton. I definitely need someone that can that is a little more comfortable
Yeah.
being able to switch and hedge and all of that, and then have Cooper on the backside, which we've seen him do plenty of times, do weak side blocks. So as of right now, that's what I got. And like I said, I think it's a little bit of a disadvantage just because not too many of these guys that when I'm looking at this list, I've been able to see the reps. So Cooper, like we mentioned, can go with almost anybody on my
Mhm.
board, but I've seen the reps time and time again with Kamal Malawatch, and it's just I have a hard time believing too many guys are going to outperform that.
Yep, I like it. I like the pick. I mean, we're on the same wavelength so far. Like these were
Mhm.
two guys that I almost considered drafting 2 and 3 in this.
Right.
And I do think as far as just sort of like my own like back of the napkin evaluations I was doing for this, I had Malawach as the top prospect in the defensive 5 category for this,
Mhm.
in like somewhat of a gap, I would say, between him and the next best guy.
Mhm.
Though I'm gonna have to pick from that group here because I'm most likely gonna need a center. I could go with a different archetype. So I'm probably going to be deciding between 2 guys when it comes
Mhm.
down to my center selection, but I do love those picks. Any other thoughts you wanted to mention on Clayton Jr. or Kaman before I get back to it here?
Oh no, I'm good. I mean, I'm excited to see who you pick.
Yes, so I'm gonna go ahead and get my primary initiator here. Like I said, I was picking from 3 guys in this
Mhm.
category. Um, Clayton was at the top of it. But I'm gonna go with Tahad Pettiford from Auburn,
Mm.
who I want a big time pull up 3-point shooter at my guard position. I want a shot maker. I want speed. And I'm gonna go with Pettiford here. Now I'll say this. It's really tough for me to pass up on LeBaron Filan from Alabama. Those were
Mhm.
the 3 guys I was gonna leave here with at least one of them. Uh, to quote the Denzel meme. So,
Right.
but I'm going to go with Pettiford, and I'm picking him above Filan only because of the shot. Like Filan is, I love his competitiveness. I love his speed. I love his speed turning the corner. Um, very, very much enjoy the way he sort of gets after it without long offensive rebounds. Just an absolute dog.
Mhm.
And I mean, I've got a lottery grade on Filan as a prospect. Like I'm a huge fan of his. And it does pain me to not go with him here, but I'm going to go with Pettiford, just because I want the pull up shot making, and I've now got 3 40%, quick trigger shooters that can either shoot off movement or they can shoot out of the pick and roll with Knipple, Knipple, Jace Richardson, and Tahad Pettiford from Auburn. And I like him too because like he's like Auburn's a great offensive team. They've been the number 1 offense in the country for the vast majority of the season. Duke
Mhm.
just this past week after the Baylor game usurped them in terms of like adjusted efficiency. Duke has led in terms of raw efficiency for most of the season too. Um, Auburn runs this sort of like modified spread flex offense.
Mhm.
It's a fun study to watch. Pettiford does a nice job fitting into it, but also like they can get to just like high pick and roll with him and Janai Broom, and that's obviously like really really potent too. So again, I feel a little bad not going with Filan here, but I'm going to go ahead with Pettiford. Um, with my 4th pick, now's when I'm going to get. I think this is going to be the first pick that's like maybe a little bit more out of left field.
Mhm.
And for my 4, I'm going to go ahead and draft Darian Williams out of Texas
Ah.
Tech. I'm going to go with what I think is, and I think there's obviously like a noticeable gap between he
Mhm.
and Cooper. But those are the 2 guys. These are the 2 like 6'7" to 6'9" guys that can really. I mean, if you wanted to add in Danny Wolf from Michigan. We talked about him a lot last week as a 7-footer who's doing some of this too, but like
Mhm.
really wanting to sort of like hone in on that, like the sort of like more archetypal wing flexibility there.
Mhm.
Williams is awesome, and he's a guy that I did not see much of him 2 seasons ago at Nevada. Um, and then during the 23-24 season, I didn't see much of him during the regular season at Texas Tech. But then when NC State was getting ready to play them in the first round of the tournament last year, I watched probably like 6 or 7 Texas Tech games from last season, and
Mhm.
he jumped off the screen. I mean, they list him at 6'6", 225. He looks taller than that.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a weird thing. The dude is a tank. 24% assist rate this season, 35% on threes, gets to the line a ton, 84% from the line, 49% on twos, decent defensive rebounder. And the guy that they just use in a lot of different ways. Like I can run inverted pick and roll with him and Pettiford. That's something Texas Tech does a lot with Williams, and they've got actually a really nice collection of guards with Hawkins and Anderson and Walton, former UNC player, and McMillan. So I like Williams. I just wanted like a big sort of like hybrid forward playmaker. And again, he's not on Flag's tier, obviously, but for the purposes of this exercise, he can still be very, very good. And I want someone I can switch with. I want like a mismatch, someone who can be a mismatch guy at the 4 for me. So really, I don't have a ton of other options. Like one of the few other guys I had in this category was Billy Richmond from Arkansas. He doesn't quite have the same size as these guys too, but lefty, I like him a lot as well. But he was tiers below Williams. And, Williams is someone that like he can and should get a shot when people look at him in the NBA. I kind of liken parts of his game to Jake LaRavia a few years ago out of Wake Forest. Sort of like really like mid-range, mid-post centric, which like that doesn't always transition to the NBA. Like by no means is this guy like the 7th best prospect, in the Sweet 16.
Right.
There's 10 other guys probably I would take ahead of him, but like I think he'll get a shot in the NBA. And someone like LaRavia, like you do have to give, it's funny because they ended up declining his 4th-year option, but I think his development as a player has been really good with Memphis. He's turned into a much quicker shooter. And I think that's something that like if Williams could do that, like if he could sort of like stabilize as a 3-point shooter and kind of get it out with a little bit more consistency, all these other things that he does, all these other tools that he has could really sort of like could really sing and sort of like show out. So I'm going to go with Williams. Now I'm feeling good too, because I have 4 guys that can run ball screens here. So I like that. I like that 1 through 4, those guys can initiate pick and roll or be the screeners for me. So, all right, back to you for picks 8 and 9, unless you have any thoughts to add on Williams or Pettiford.
So for Williams, I actually really liked him. I definitely considered drafting him, especially now that the board kind of fell the way it did. I actually do really like that you brought up Jake LaRavia, because Darian Williams, he reminds me of like, was it I'm trying to remember when Memphis had like all the wings, like all the young up and come. Was that, I think it was Lag, because I know they traded a couple of them, but he that's just what he reminds me of that, like those different wings at the time. None of them really, were what they are now, from Zaire Williams to Sadalma to Jake LaRavia, like to all those guys.
Yeah.
But
I guess I should say too, LaRavia, not with, he's with the Kings now too. He was traded. Yeah. But yes.
Yeah, he does he reminds me of that, like, I wouldn't say era because it was probably less than a year, but everybody was wondering like what would Memphis bench look like, and they just had a bunch of wings because they know that's where the NBA is headed, and I think all of them turned out well, even though they have gone to other places now. I think Zaire Williams has some good games I think he's with the Nets now. Jake LaRavia, like as you mentioned, has developed well. So I really do like that comparison. And then Pettiford for Auburn, I think that I like his game. Like I knew about him before, but I really, really watched him in the SEC tournament. He does a lot for that team. I think that it was smart for Aiden Holloway to transfer from Auburn to Alabama. And even though he's doing well there, I think Pettiford is just like what Auburn needed to kind of get to where they are now. I mean, as you mentioned, plenty of offensive firepower on that team, but he just adds a different level to it, to something that they didn't really have. They tried players to do it, but I think that his ability to shoot is something that I feel like they need, because it's almost, I wouldn't say it's guaranteed, but it's to me it's a little more reliable than the other guys, especially considering he's a freshman. So I really like Pettiford.
I saw him up close too at Duke this season, and quick, competitive. He's a little undersized, so part of me also was like for this exercise thought about just going Sion James from Duke as my one, and sort of like sacrificing a little bit of like shot creation and stuff just to get like another power defender and connective passer. I also considered Tyrese Proctor. these sort of like connective point guards.
Right.
But again, I really wanted to squeeze some shot making out of the spot here, and I'm
Mhm.
hoping I have enough size and defensive versatility to sort of like make do elsewhere on the court.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I have 8 and 9.
Yep.
Okay. So with 8, oh man, I had like who I'm going to pick, but now I'm kind of like thinking about it. Tyrese Parker would be good, but the thing is, I already have 2 Duke players, so this is where I might want to switch it up just for the fun.
I backed you into a corner here.
I know, right? I need some perimeter defense, and while I don't think this guy's the best guy available, I like what he's been able to do. So I'm gonna have to go Lamont Butler from Kentucky as just. I mean, I'm strictly getting him for his defense at the point of attack. We know how San Diego State has been a defensive team. It didn't look like it when they played UConn 2 years ago, but UConn, that's just what UConn does. But I really just like his defense. Being with Kentucky, he's injured now, I believe, right? I think he got injured.
Butler.
Or no, he's back now.
Yeah,
he was
back.
injured before. Yeah,
he had a good game against Illinois in the round 32.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah, and I missed that game. So yeah, but I like Lamont Butler. I like what he's going to be able to do for the team. As you mentioned about connective point guard, I know that he doesn't feel like a true one, but I mean I'm willing to take it. I have Clayton. I have Cooper. So I think that him being that is just fine. Just being my point of attack defender, he can hit the open shot, 36% 3-point shooter. So I'll take that. I really just needed the defense. I do need some size as well. So I would probably go, and this is where it gets tricky because there's guys like talent-wise for sure I should pick, but then it's also like, I mean, it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm actually surprised. There's a couple of guys I'm surprised. Like I get to your sentiment about there's so many guys. Like you just want to pick them because you don't want them to be left off.
Yeah, it
but
feels
at the same time. Like
going through this exercise of preparing for this, I was like, I'm gonna feel bad after this because
it feels
some really good players that are not gonna make the cut. Like I probably listed out like 50, 60 names that I thought were like worthwhile for this, maybe closer to 75. And we're gonna take 10 of them. So that doesn't feel good, but that's how it goes.
Because it's almost like I wish I could spend 30 seconds talking about the 60 names,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Tough. I'm just going to have to go with, oh man. I'm going to have to just go with potential upside.
Okay.
And just go JT Toppin from Texas Tech.
Wow.
I think that I mean, that's really just what it comes down to. I think that there's other players I probably could have picked, but his size, his ability to rebound, since I'm missing out on some rebounding with Kamon Malawach, I think I'm gonna just have to go him. Like I can truly just say that it's strictly just off potential, and this has nothing to really do with like fit. But I like what he does. I mean, I think he's improved. I think that he's he does a lot for that team. I know, was it Kerwin? I forgot his last name, but he went to Carolina.
Walton.
Yeah. He went crazy the other day. Like he had 27 points and they were all from the 3-point line. But it's definitely JT Toppin's team, Big 12 Player of the Year. But I really just need the rebounding. I need the size. I do got 2 undersized point guards, and neither one of them are ones. And it's not as though he's going to help with the playmaking, but I think that my team can play make enough to where it can offset, what I get from Malawach and from Toppin. But I need someone to crash the boards. I need someone that can at least use their size to defend to some extent. So I'm gonna have to go JT Toppin.
Yeah, a couple things, and I'll start with Butler. He's been a dog this season. He's been such a nice plug-in. I just missed some time with injuries, but he's been a really good plug-and-play guy for them. Kentucky's got an interesting offense. Like it's a lot of 5 out. So, 2 of their top playmakers are centers with Williams and Garrison. But
and I really like Williams. Really, if I was going to get Cooper at some point, I would have thought about Williams.
In Carr's been a front court guy for them too. But certainly Butler and Ategwa Owe have given them something. Butler's been more of a playmaker for others, but Owe's been really good this season too. And 2 guys that I definitely considered, and two guys like especially Owe probably deserves a look with the next
Yeah.
level as just like a competitor who can plug a lot of gaps and can really guard and can make shots. That just good competitor, like all that kind of stuff. So I like the Butler pick. I'm not gonna lie, man. The Toppin pick hurts me because I'm pretty sure that's who I was gonna take.
Really?
Yes. I love JT Toppin. I liked him when he was at New Mexico last season, and he's been amazing this season. He showed a little bit of stretch, 31% on threes. It's not, just made 16 of them. It's not quite there yet, but I think with another year or two of development, it could be. He's obviously an amazing offensive rebound or, amazing two-way rebounder. It gives you some rim protection. Like your team's dominating the glass with Cooper, who's an amazing rebounder, Toppin, who's an amazing rebounder, and Malawatch, despite he's got some inconsistencies, he's still 7-2 and plays above the rim, and he can rebound it as well too. So I like your rim protection and your rebounding. It's going to be a little tight for you in the half court offense, though.
Yeah,
man.
that was the nasty part.
A little tight. It's workable because Cooper's there, so he can kind of just like solve it. And again, Toppin can like shoot it a little bit in playing space, and Malawatch can flirt with it too. So it's like it's workable, I would say. And and certainly having just like Clayton's pull up shooting just like opens everything else up too, But it's a lot of pressure on Walter to hit threes. But I love Toppin, and again, I think I'll say this. I was deciding between two guys for my last pick. It was going to be between Toppin and the guy who I will end up taking, which is Derek Queen, as my center, one and done. From Maryland, obviously he's been playing some 4 this season, next to Juju Reese, who's actually made my list for this exercise as one of the top 5 like college 5s is sort of how I had him labeled, along with Trey Kaufman-Renn from Purdue, Carson Cooper from Michigan State, Dylan Cardell from Auburn. Kaufman-Renn can actually do some stuff in space, and he's got nice touch in the mid-range. He can do some stuff on the short roll, but just for clarity's sake, it was easiest to put him there. But Queen, I have him as my top front court playmaker in this. I have him ahead of Janai Broome, who I also considered for this, and I had him ahead of Danny Wolf. I also considered Alex Condon from Florida. But in the end, I'm going to go with Derek Queen. Look, Queen is an interesting guy to scout. We've talked about him like a decent amount on here. It's hard to sort of like figure out lineups and roster construction projecting to the next level, especially with a 5 that doesn't shoot threes yet, doesn't really protect the rim, 4% block rate this season. It's not terrible, but it's not amazing. 2% steal rate. But his processing, his vision, his hands, his skill, his ability to be a like legitimate hub in the front court is really impressive. And so there's, you're going to see, I think you're going to see some funky comps for him this season. Like you're going to see Sengun, you're going to see Sabonis, Domo Sabonis, you're going to see Boris Diaw. Like he's got that kind of like cerebral game. So I'm a little worried about my team defensively, but offensively, this is going to be a tough team to stop. I've got playmakers. All 5 of my guys can pass. All 5 of my guys can run pick and roll, both sides of it too. So again, defensively, it's a little concerning, but from a pure talent play, I just couldn't. Especially once Toppin was off the board, made it a little bit easier. Like if we were continuing to build out the rosters, like I would look at, I know Broome's not a defender, but I feel a little bad. Broome's maybe. Outside of Cooper, he's one of the best players.
He was one I really wanted to pick him, but
I feel a little bad leaving him off there. And again, if we were building out these rosters, I would probably find some rim protection, like I'd do, Trevin Brazil or Toby Awaka or Hand Lockton from Florida or something like Brant Nelson, something like that to get a little bit of rim protection. But for this sake, I think the talent is just too good. So. I guess we need to draft coaches now. Do we do this snake style as well too? Like, is it stay my pick or does it go back to you?
I think since I got first pick, it should be you.
Okay, cool. Coach. All right. I'm going to keep this one easy. I'm going to go John Shire from Duke, from my coach here. I think this guy is one of the best communicators in the sport. He's an excellent recruiter, which doesn't really matter for our purposes in this exercise, but he is a guy that players really connect with. Good communicator, thoughtful mind, doesn't get rattled on the sideline,
Yeah.
um, and is a guy who I think is turning into, and it will need to see more of a sample, but this is something that I've written about and talked about a lot this season. Like his development as, I think, one of the more creative designers of offense. You know, the last couple of seasons, I think UConn has gotten a lot of press, deservingly so. Alabama with Nate Oates,
Yeah.
Mark Pope at Kentucky, BYU, now Kentucky. But I think what Duke has done this season, how they've reoriented their 5-out offense and they've changed the spacing template up for that. They've moved Cooper to that middle role and they've put Malwatch, the other 5, space to the wing. That's opened up so much. They've borrowed this concept from Joe Mazzulla and the Boston Celtics. It's what you see the Hornets play with every night too. Like Charles Lee brought it from Boston as well. Quinn Snyder and the Hawks do it to open up the floor for Jalen Johnson. So I just think he's checking all the boxes for me, like in-game adjustments, this, offensive schemer, great defensive schemer as well, communicator, and certainly someone who I think is pretty good in terms of like situational basketball too, in terms of play calling, adjustments, lineup combinations, all that kind of stuff. Flexible. And again, like as we're sort of like getting into this sort of like newer generation of college coaches, like, and we're not like the page hasn't fully turned yet. Like, Tom Izzo is still around, like there's still plenty of these guys, John Calipari, Rick Pitino, like some of these guys are like reinventing themselves. And, but as we're getting into the sort of like newer age of these things, I think a guy like Shire is someone that has incredible amounts of upside. And he's someone that like, I don't think this is coming anytime soon, but like if he continues to like keep it rolling, if he ends up winning titles and stuff like that at Duke, I think he's someone that would fit like coaching an NBA team too.
Yeah.
I think he has like the right like philosophies and disposition to do that. But like we're not I mean, like he also could end up coaching at Duke for the next 40 years too. So it's like, there's a wide range of outcomes, but I'm going to go him. I think he's done a phenomenal job. I think he also should have won Coach of the Year in the ACC this season. No shade to Pat Kelsey. I'm a big fan, but for what John did, putting this team together and getting it to sing the way that it has, the way he reinvented the offense in the span of one off season. He gets a lot of credit for that flexibility too. So I'll go Coach Shire for my guy.
That's who I wanted. Of course, I got 2 of his players, so I just felt like it was only right. He is the reason I like their fit because of what, like you mentioned. So it definitely. And I figured you were going to go him because he's a great coach. Like he like everything you said. I wouldn't be surprised if he coached to the NBA. That brings up a good question of just like how that pipeline between college basketball and the NBA will go going forward. College is becoming like you can.
It seems to be inverted now, right?
Right.
Like we just saw Wes Wilcox, who's I think the assistant GM of the Kings. He's going to leave and go become the GM of Utah, University of Utah next year. So
I'm just interested to start seeing what it's going to look like because it felt like for a while that if you couldn't coach in the NBA, some people thought you couldn't coach unless you were the Tom Izzo's, whoever. But now I think if you just, win at the college level, I don't think anyone cares about you going to the NBA. There's always going to be those little, murmurs, but I think that just being able to, like Duke is going to be a pipeline for the NBA. That's enough of your resume for where people was like, oh, I don't care that he never came and proved himself in the NBA. So I think that if you continue to like develop players in that time span you have them, year, 4 years, doesn't matter. I think that that's just going to be just as good to a lot of people. So for my coach, I'm actually going an old school coach just because I've always liked this coach. I like that he just always gets his players ready to go. And I'm going to have to go Tom Izzo. I only am really just going Tom Izzo just because he knows how to get the best out of his players. Specifically this season, he hasn't had much shooting. I don't have much shooting. So I feel as though that will go well. one of the best rebounding teams in the country is Michigan State. They play great defense. I really, really thought about going with Kelvin Sampson.
He's who.
Um,
If I had picked
yeah,
second and you took Shire, I was going to go Kelvin.
I really, really.
Maybe Nate Oates or
Mhm.
Mark Pope, whom I like a lot too, as far as
Yeah,
offensive
I like Mark
minds.
Pope. And the
But
reason I didn't go O's because I can't. My team can't shoot, and so it's like, well, I'm not gonna really go for that. But
mhm.
they like all of these coaches. I think a lot of these coaches are good. But the only reason I'm going
I mean,
Tom
how
Izzo,
about Kevin Young at BYU, who was like
yeah,
the offensive coordinator for the Suns the last few seasons,
mhm,
including when they went to the NBA Finals in 21 when they had the best offense in the league the year after that. I
mhm,
mean, he was sort of like, the coach in waiting to an extent underneath Monty Williams. And it was a
mhm.
guy that had buzz as an NBA head coach, and he just decided to go to BYU. And now he's got, AJ DeBansa, the number 1 or 2 prospect in the country coming into Provo next year. So like there's definitely like more, it's becoming like a little bit more spread. There's just like different outcomes you can sort of like get into it.
Mhm.
Obviously it helps that there's now just like so much money in college sports too,
Yeah,
which like
yeah,
that, like society wise, I don't know if that's a good thing. Like that's a different conversation,
right.
but for these purposes, it's if you're sort of like interested in the business of basketball, as I know you and I are,
Mhm.
it is something to sort of like take note of for sure.
No, for sure. And we can talk about it. I like the way like college basketball is going. I know some people, feel certain ways about it, but as a fan of college basketball, I like the way it's going. I think it gives a lot of people opportunities. So many times we see a coach or a GM or whatever just have a bad outing, a bad showing, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. And then now they can go to the college ranks and be a team GM or assistant GM, or heck, we even saw Steph Curry go is the assistant GM to Davidson now. So I
Yeah.
just like all the opportunity it brings. But yeah, Tom Izzo, I think that he's just been there, done that, has had teams with no NBA players be good, had teams with a lot of NBA players and still be good. So if anyone could take like my mix of talent, I think it'll be Tom Izzo. But
Yeah.
yeah, Kelvin Sampson, Rick Barnes from Tennessee is another coach I thought about.
Matt
Just a
Matt
lot of
Painter,
great folks.
Matt Painter at
Matt
Purdue.
Painter,
There's some good ones,
yeah.
but all right, we're running up against it here. I'm just going to real quickly run through the teams here. Darian's team: Cooper Flagg, Walter Clayton Jr., Kaman Malawach, Lamont Butler, JT Toppin. I like that. I like that team a lot. Really like Cooper, Clayton, Kaman, and Toppin. Those are guys that I was all eyeing pretty seriously here. For my team, I've got Con Knipple, Jace Richardson, Tahad Pettiford, Darian Williams, Derek Queen, LeBaron Philon. He would be my 6th man, and I'm sad that he's not on my roster. I'm not feeling great about that. The guys that we mentioned in the previous podcast that are still playing in the Sweet 16, you've got Richardson, Danny Wolf, Cooper Flagg, Kaman Malawach, Clayton Jr., Derek Queen, and Chaz Lanier from Tennessee, who we didn't touch on at all today, but he had a
And that's sad
a
too.
nice performance last week in the tournament. Look, if you enjoy our work, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to episodes. Take care. Go Hornets, and enjoy the rest